So hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of Mimamsa. Today, from international relations, last time Israel and Palestine, and religion and mythology on our in our first video. This time we switch to history, and it is a very interesting topic, and I think something which each and every individual of this subcontinent feels very passionately about. It's about our forefathers. It's about our fathers of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi, father of the Indian nation, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, father of Pakistan. So, without further, ado, let's just first start. And I would request Ishan to first give us a brief backgrounds about both Jinnah and Gandhi, from where they were and what kind of bringing up they had in their initial path of life.
Right. I think one common thing that we see, which is like very interesting fact, between Jinnah and Gandhi, is that both of them were Gujaratis. So both of them have their origin in Gujarat, and Jinnah, he was from a family of recent converts. So his
I think his father converted first, right?
Yeah. So his it was like a very recent convert. In fact, this is a very curious phenomena that all these recent converts, they actually ended up creating an Islamic nation. Something even Iqbal, Iqbal's grandfather, the Allama Iqbal, his grandfather was a Kashmiri Pandit and converted very recently. Let's not digress. But yeah, so Jinnah and Gandhi, both of them were from Gujarat. And Gandhi, we all know that his father was the prime minister, and in the Junagadh kingdom. And so Gandhi came from a very good family actually, but his father died, and his brother saved all the earnings that he could, and sent Gandhi abroad. Gandhi went abroad, studied, lived in UK, South Africa, and came back to India. And in 1916, Gandhi was, by the time Gandhi came back to India, by 1920s, he was already, the household names when he started non-cooperation movement and, couple of these other mass movements in India. That is the brief about, Gandhi. Gandhi, while he was in UK, and in South Africa, he came across religion. He read Bible, he read Quran, because his host in South Africa was a Muslim family. That is how he ended up getting a job. They were like Gujarati.
I think it was Dada Abdullah, if I'm not wrong. He was going to fight a case with Dada Abdullah. I don't know if the family was the same where he stayed.
Yeah, exactly. So that is how he got introduced to South Africa. So he came across Quran and Bible first, and then he tried to find out some truths about Hinduism, and that is when he started reading about religion, and became a religious man, as we know. The journey for Jinnah was slightly different. So Jinnah was, in fact, Jinnah worked for Dadabhai Nauroji, in fact, while he was in UK, and Jinnah was a very secular person, secular Muslim, and as a in his personal life, he used to eat pork. He was into taking wine, and married someone outside his own religion. So that was Jinnah, and that is where his background comes from. And so Jinnah was also a lawyer, and Gandhi was also a lawyer. That is another similarity between the two. So I think this is a good context. That is how these two characters were, and that is their brief background.
Yeah. So I just carry on with what you on whatever you said and where you left, and I'll give you my perspective about the characters. Especially Jinnah. Jinnah is a very, very fascinating character. I think once I was thinking, if I ever had to do a thesis, it would be on Jinnah. because he was such a fascinating character, and his evolution throughout his journey from being a very secular liberal character to someone who has been associated with Islamic nation state is very, very intriguing and very, very fascinating. Right?
Exactly.
Two incidents that really strike me about Jinnah's life. One is around the fact that you mentioned that he married outside his religion. So he was married early, but his wife died. Then he fell in love of his friend in the Petit family. It's a very popular family in India at that point of time. And the daughter was like in the adolescent age, below 18 years, and still they sort of fell for each other. And Jinnah could marry at that point of time, but eventually he did around 18 years of age. And a lot of people, I think, wrongly call Jinnah pedophile. But I think given the circumstances at that point of time that existed, below 18-year age marriages and affections were normal. I think given the social circumstances at that point of time.
Yeah.
So, and Jinnah eventually fell for this girl. Yeah.
Fun fact, Muslims can still marry at the age of 15 in India of 21st century. So that age of consent law or a couple of other things don't apply to Muslims in India as of now on this date. So that is allowed.
Anyways, so that happened, and he married someone from another religion, and so they had a daughter called Dina, and her wife, I think this petite family girl actually died about 5-10 years of marriage. And Dina, when she grew up, she liked a boy from the Wadia family. Right. I think Neville Wadia is the name. I don't remember. Neville Wadia, I think, is the name. So, then Dina goes to Jinnah and says, Dad, I want to marry this guy. He is from another religion, blah, blah, blah. So Jinnah says, there are so many Muslim boys in India. Why couldn't you find one? And Dina replies to Jinnah, says that there were so many Muslim girls in India. Why couldn't you find one?
Right.
So, it's a very fascinating story. And then this sort of eventually led to severing of the ties between Dina and Jinnah. Dina married into the Wadia family, the famous Bombay dyeing, where Nes Wadia is her grandson. So Nes Wadia's great grandfather is actually Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the famous boyfriend of ex-boyfriend of Preeti Zinta and owner of Kings 11 Punjab.
Right. And what an irony, right? Jinnah convinced some like millions of Muslims that they can go to that they're going to create a new Medina. There is this idea of creating a new Medina in Pakistan, and Jinnah was able to sell that idea to millions of Muslims in India, but he couldn't convert his own daughter, convince his own daughter to come with him to Pakistan, the country which he was to head, right?
Yeah, and this is the important thread that we both need to hit upon in this conversation. I'll just need 2 minutes of your time for giving the next incident that I was talking about. So this happened, and Jinnah is someone who has, so personally speaking, who suffered a lot in his life, in a very personal sense, because the first marriage ended up in a year or so, and the second marriage also ended. So to say, there are different reports that they did communicate over letters and other parts, but at least for the public image, Jinnah couldn't, make those sort of contacts with her daughter, especially when she married someone from other religion, right? So that was the issue. So what used to happen was that Jinnah used to come to home, and whenever he used to feel overwhelmed about his past, his personal experiences, what he used to do, he used to go. There was a top terrace, I think, in his room, in his house, where there were the clothes of his daughter and his wife, ex-wife. What he used to do, he used to ask the roomkeepers to spread all the clothes in the room. And then he used to just sit there and watch all the clothes and used to cry for hours. Right. So that is a very, very strong scene for me to fathom, that such was this man, and the kind of emotional turmoil that this man was going through. So I think this is the background, wherein I think we should move ahead towards the other part of his public appearance, wherein how, a man who is extremely secular, extremely liberal, in fact, he criticizes the use of Ganpati festivals and everything related to the Hindu customs in the public life, so to say, to attract masses. By Gandhi and Tilak and everyone. And in fact, not what many other secular liberals would do, he uses the same metrics on Muslims himself, right? When the Khilafat movement is happening, he sort of goes against them and says that, Gandhi is mad, that he's allowing Congress to make such coalitions with these radical Islamist people, right? But Gandhi was then, in no one's control at that point. He was going ahead with his weird ideas.
Right.
So now this person converts into come to 1937 to 40, and in 40 he releases the Pakistan resolution. What has happened? What has changed?
So I think so one of the abhi just said Gandhi ke baare mein, when you're talking about Gandhi, right? So one similarity that I see between other similarity that I see between Gandhi and Jinnah was that both of them, couldn't even, they were like really bad at managing their own family. So the same thing happened with Gandhi, right? Gandhi had no control over his son. One of his son actually converted to Islam, in fact. So Gandhi,
I didn't know that.
yeah. So so just to go against Gandhi for the sake of going against Gandhi, and because of Gandhi's obscurantism, his wife died because Gandhi won't allow her Western medicine. Right. He was like more interested in prayers. So Gandhi, yeah. So one thing about Gandhi is that Gandhi was a good Hindu. That is something that you can say about Gandhi. But the other thing about Gandhi was that Gandhi never took forward the Hindu cause very vocally. Like he wouldn't identify himself with Hindus. Instead, there were instances in his life when he would rather go and because he used to feel that I already identify with this one group, so I have to win my support of this another group, and I also want to champion their cause. So he would go an extra step which even a Muslim won't go. Muslim like Jinnah won't, right? So Jinnah was like ki nahi. When Khilafat thing was happening, Jinnah was like ki nahi, don't introduce this the religious aspect, and don't introduce masses with something like this. Jinnah was in favor of doing elite politics. But Gandhi was of belief that Muslims will never um, come on a national platform unless it has something to do with their religion. And I think this is where the Indian secularism drives its origin, and the kind of secularism that was practiced by Congress for last 70 years, it was also about that. There is this subtle assumption deep inside that and I think that is the biggest irony. In fact, these people, they call themselves seculars, but in their minds they have already assumed that to win over Muslims, they'll have to give some token, special kind of a token benefits to them, and that is what Gandhianism is all about. So yeah, if we just talk about like what led to the transformation of Jinnah.
There's just 2 points that I want to make on this Gandhi issue, since we have already digressed from Jinnah to Gandhi on this issue. 2 points. One, the mistake a lot of people do is to think of Gandhi as a philosopher. I mean, for example, if you take Gandhian ideology for secularism, I mean, that's a stupid thing to do because he was not a philosopher.
Right.
And, Humayun Kabir is a famous, political thinker. He says that it is better to think of Gandhi as a scientist rather than a philosopher.
Right.
And scientist, in a lot of ways, he was a strategist to me, right? Because he understood what are the political circumstances at different places, such as in South Africa, and he engineered his politics around it, right? So in the Indian context also, he found out that there was this differentiation between Hindus and Muslims, and he found कि ये जो तरीका है ना, अगर हम थोड़ा सा इस तरीके से प्ले कर लेंगे, थोड़ा सा radical elements को खेल लेंगे, तो शायद जो मुस्लिम जो masses हैं और जो elites हैं उनको अपनी तरफ हम खींच सकते हैं। ये गांधी को लगा और फिर वो उस तरीके से उन्होंने वो खेलने की कोशिश। और इसमें सेकंड पॉइंट ये जो तुम बोल रहे थे जान कि Gandhi went out of his way to appease even the radical aspects of Islam. The best example I think is the death of Swami Shraddhanand, right? And he was killed by, I think, by a guy named Abdul Rashid. And then Gandhi in the Guwahati session called this guy into the Congress session, right, and said कि this is Rashid भाई हमारे साथ हैं और मुझे इनसे बिल्कुल भी घृणा नहीं। क्यों? क्योंकि इन्होंने किसी को मारा है तो क्या हुआ, इनके अंदर वो भाव किसी तरीके से पनपा था तो इसलिए उन्होंने मार दिया और हम सबको इनसे घृणा करने की जरूरत नहीं। So what kind of messes this sense in the society, right? कि यार तुम कुछ भी कर लो, रैडिकल एलिमेंट्स हो सकते हो, तुम किसी को मार सकते हो और तुम बोल दोगे भाई नहीं मेरे अंदर तो थोड़ा सा गुस्सा आ गया था तो इसलिए मैंने कर दिया। तो ये बहुत गलत डायरेक्शन में लेके चली गई इंडिया की पॉलिटिक्स।
Right. In fact, Abdul Rashid is still a figure that is celebrated in Pakistan. So when this entire thing around, Salman, what is his name? Salman, ye jo Tableen Singh ka husband hai. Salman Taseer. So Salman Taseer was, the governor of Punjab at that time, and he was killed by someone called Mumtaz Qadri. And when Mumtaz Qadri killed him, so the people used the example of Abdul Rashid was given. So Abdul Rashid, Abdul Rashid is still looked up in Pakistan. Someone who Gandhi celebrated in one of the Congress sessions. So yeah, that is the irony of the entire thing. But yeah, if you would like to continue forward and talk about how Jinnah transformed into someone who ended up creating a country like Pakistan.
So, my take on Jinnah is similar to my understanding of Gandhi. It is more political in nature. Jinnah, for most of his early part, was a highly secular and a proponent of Hindu-Muslim unity. I think even Sarojini Naidu is on record saying those words, that Jinnah is a great friend of or a great proponent of the Hindu-Muslim unity. Right. So that was there in terms, and being a Western educated lawyer, he understood the modern constitutional and liberal values. So he was steadfast to them, right? Unlike Gandhi, who, since very early days, I think it was primarily because of his experience in South Africa that he realized कि यार सिर्फ और सिर्फ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मेथड्स पे रह करके या फिर उस तरीके की पॉलिटिक्स करके नहीं होगा, थोड़ा सा अलग अपने को जाना पड़ेगा। कुछ गोखले से उन्होंने उठाया स्पिरिचुअलाइजेशन वगैरह, और फिर एंड मासेस वगैरह को इन्वॉल्व करके देखा वहां पे कि भाई थोड़ा सा रिलीजन डाल देने से औरतें वगैरह भी आ जाती हैं, सब लोग आ जाते हैं तो मजा आ जाता है, ज्यादा प्रेशर आ जाते हैं तो हो जाता है, एग्जीक्यूट हो जाता है। तो उसी को इंडिया में भी एग्जीक्यूट करने की कोशिश की, राइट? बट जिन्ना ने ये नहीं किया। जिन्ना ने नहीं किया तो एज अ पॉलिटिकल ऑपोजिशन जिन्ना के पास, अगर मैं इफ आई एम जिन्ना, 1920 to 1930 तो ऑलमोस्ट इज वॉश्ड आउट। 30 में थोड़ा बहुत जिन्ना का रोल आता है अराउंड सिविल डिसोबीडियंस मूवमेंट, उसके बाद 11 पॉइंट डिमांड वगैरह होती है और फिर राउंड टेबल कॉन्फ्रेंसेस है। तो 1930 to 1935 Jinnah is in England, and being the great advocate that he was hearing or advocating cases for most of the rich Indians in the Privy Council, the highest court of appeal then, because we didn't have Supreme Court right back then. तो तब जाके फिर 1934 में आई थिंक सुप्रीम कोर्ट बन जाता है इंडिया में, और आई थिंक उसके अराउंड फिर जिन्ना इंडिया आ जाते हैं। एंड फिर इंडिया आने के बाद उनके पास अब वो देखते हैं कि भाई मुस्लिम लीग की जो पॉलिटिक्स है वो कहाँ पे जा रही है, ठीक, वो कहाँ जा सकती है। और इसलिए यहाँ पे मुस्लिम लीग का थोड़ा सा 2 मिनट का कॉन्टेक्स्ट देना जरूरी है, क्योंकि मुस्लिम लीग किस तरह की राजनीति कर रही थी। मुस्लिम लीग जो है वो यहाँ पे एलिट्स की राजनीति कर रही थी। मुस्लिम लीग के फाउंडर कौन थे? आगा खान थे, यहाँ के बंगाल के जो
डक्का के नवाब
हुआ करते थे, राइट। तो इनका तो शुरू से ही ये था कि भाई किस तरीके से बंगाल को अलग कर लिया जाए। तो शुरू में मुस्लिम लीग ने अब ये किया कि भाई बंगाल को अलग कर लेते हैं, बट फिर बंगाल अलग नहीं हुआ, तो इसलिए थोड़ा सा और रिजेंटमेंट आ गया, राइट, अगेंस्ट द ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट। बट 1934-1935 में जब ब्रिटिशर्स तंग है गांधी से कि भाई ये कांग्रेस बहुत सारा भसड़ मचा रही है और जिन्ना के पास एक पार्टी है जो कि एलिट्स की पार्टी है, तो जिन्ना इनके लीडर्स हैं, और जिन्ना एलिट्स लोगों में तो भाई ऑब्वियसली बिकॉज़ ही वाज स्मार्ट, ही वाज सेंसिबल एंड गुड लॉयर, सबके केसेस लड़ते थे, तो वहां जान पहचान है इनकी। तो अब क्योंकि सेंट्रिस्ट जो लाइन है वो तो ले लिया है अपने अपने कांग्रेस ने, तो अब एक पॉलिटिकल पार्टी को कौन सा लाइन लेना पड़ेगा अगर वहां पे अपनी अस्तित्व को बनाना है। और वो बहुत क्लियर था कि एलिट वाली हार्ड लाइनिंग पॉलिटिक्स को ही करना पड़ेगा, अदरवाइज उसके पास कोई ऑप्शन नहीं है एग्जिस्टेंस में आने का। और वो बहुत क्लियर हो गया था जिन्ना को इतने सालों तक कि भाई गांधी सक्सेसफुल है, इस तरह की कर रहा है। और जो दूसरे ऑपोजिट में भी लोग हैं, कुछ हिंदू मास के लोग हैं, वो भी राइट विंग एक्सट्रीमिज्म पे भी हैं। तो अब यहाँ पे उनके पास ऑप्शन नहीं है कि कुछ कर सकते। अब वो लेफ्ट विंग नहीं जा सकते। लेफ्ट विंग क्यों नहीं जा सकते? क्योंकि एक तो कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी है ही जो कि बेवकूफ है, और दूसरी चीज ये लोग एलिट्स की पार्टी है, तो एनीवेज लेफ्ट विंग नहीं जा सकती। और ये जो एलिट है ये एनीवेज कांग्रेस से परेशान है, क्योंकि ये बोल रहे हैं कि भाई आई थिंक कराची सेशन वगैरह में उन्होंने बोल दिया है कि भाई हम लोग तो मासेस को बहुत सारा पावर दे देंगे, लैंड रिफॉर्म कर देंगे। तो ये सब जो अमीर ढाका के नवाब जैसे लोग हैं, इनको लग रहा है कि भाई हमारी जमीन उमीन तो चली जाएगी। तो अब यहाँ पे इनके लिए क्लियरली सेंस बनता है कि एक फ्यूडल माइंडसेट के साथ एक पार्टी बनाई जाए और एक एक्सट्रीम लाइन ऑफ थॉट लिया जाए। तो वो एक्सट्रीम लाइन ऑफ थॉट को परस्यू करते हैं। 37 में वो बुरी तरह हारते हैं और वो उसके बाद जाते हैं कांग्रेस पार्टी के साथ रिकंसाइल करने के लिए, भाई कि हमको थोड़ा थोड़ा सीट दे दो। एंड कांग्रेस नहीं, फक ऑफ, हम तो नहीं दे सकते भाई, क्योंकि तो हम तो बहुत सारी सीट जीत चुके हैं। तो
हाँ, तो देखो मतलब आई थिंक जिन्ना के साथ, जिन्ना को पहली बार मतलब धक्का तभी लगा लाइफ में व्हेन दी फर्स्ट 1936 वाले जब इलेक्शंस हुए, तो at that time he got that kind of a shock, and from there he I mean by 1940 he already had Pakistan resolution in his hand, and he was declaring the organization of state for Muslims in India, in Lahore. So he like very quickly changed his positions basis की जो भी circumstances थे वहाँ पे। तो जिन्ना ने जो he was able to very quickly change his tack between 1936 to 1940, and he wholesale started selling the idea of Pakistan to the masses, and that too somewhat successfully. So although a lot of people claim that because 90% of people at that time did not have franchisee, and they couldn't vote, but still the idea of Pakistan at least was like very popular. And the cruel irony is that people who ended up voting for the idea of Pakistan stayed back in India. They couldn't go back, and people who voted against Muslim League and people who were slightly of a secular kind of outlook, it is where the Pakistan was created. So it is interesting. It is interesting to note that in Punjab the Unionists won the election, in the Northwest Frontier province it was Congress that won the election. So it was only in Sindh that Muslim League. It was only, I guess, in Sindh and in Bengal that the Muslim League was getting their strengths from. And so yeah, so that is the cruel irony of the entire thing. And I think it would be wrong to say that Jinnah was not able to sell his idea very successfully to the masses. I think he was pretty successful at doing that. The other thing is that I think we should now discuss about what was his actual thought process. What was it that he envisioned of Pakistan, and how did he why did he come to this conclusion that Muslims and Hindus are two nations, so the popular two nation theory. And I think I would just want to read one of his quotes which has like really inspired me, and this is something that he said in the Lahore session while moving the Pakistan resolution
1940.
In 1940. And he says that it is a dream that Hindus and Muslims can ever evolve a common nationality. Hindus and Muslims belong to two different religious philosophies, social customs, and literary traditions. They neither intermarry nor eat together. And indeed, they belong to two different civilizations, which are based mainly on conflicting ideas and conceptions. So their aspects on life and of life are very different. So it is quite clear that Hindus and Muslims derive their inspiration from different sources of history, which is, I think, very true. So they have different epics, which is again very true. their heroes are different and different episodes. Very often the hero of one is a foe of the other. So it happens that, the hero of, let's just take the example of Maharana Pratap and Akbar, so, and Shivaji and Aurangzeb. So I think there is always this thing that, hero of one is the enemy of the other. To yoke together two such nations under a single state, one as a numerical minority and other as a majority, must lead to growing discontent and final destruction of any fabric that may be so built up by for the government of such a state. So I think this entire I really like this paragraph because it tells you how clear thinking he was. And this entire I think he was able to explain his reasoning about Hindus and Muslims being two nations very very clearly and very succinctly. And with the rise of the kind of politics that we see in India right now, I think it can be said to a certain extent that the way India is today, it refutes a lot of the points that Jinnah made on that 1940 while moving on 1940s while moving this resolution. Baki, I think you disagree with that.
Yeah, I disagree. I disagree with both the paragraph that you read and the objectives that Jinnah had. Right. और ये मैं उसके पास डेटा से भी रेफरेंस ले रहा हूँ कि भाई वो पहले एक सेक्युलर इंसान था, तो बहुत कम लाइकली है कि पूरी तरीके से चेंज होगा. The fact that was that change for Jinnah, I think, was his political motives. So politically, I think he became extremely radical. That is forgiven. No two ways about it. But क्या वो भी मन ही मन एक पाकिस्तान चाह रहे थे, वो एक डिबेटेबल इशू है. A lot of people still say कि he was taking the extremes end of the spectrum just to have a better bargaining chip. So
right. I think
उनको भी नहीं यकीन था कि मुझे पाकिस्तान मिल जाएगा. ये ब्रिटिश इतने बड़े बेवकूफ तो नहीं, बहुत इतने स्मार्ट होंगे कि वो सही में पाकिस्तान दे देंगे. राइट.
इसमें जो एक मेन इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट ये है कि जिन्ना ये वाली जो थ्योरी है that Jinnah was using Pakistan as a bargaining chip. I think this is something that is very popular in Pakistan among the liberal and secular intelligentsia to get some respectability, right? ये आयशा सिद्दीकी वगैरह ये सब ये वाले ideas को popularize करते हैं. And one of the Indian academicians, I think Vinay Sitapati, kind of through his work creating a new Medina, उसने I think he has hit this point, hit against this point. But I think that would be a separate debate altogether. But yeah, मतलब जिन्ना ने सोचा था या नहीं सोचा था, but I think उसका conviction and I think it is quite possible that someone who is not very religious can become politically radical. And you can, in fact, I would, अगर हम इंडिया में भी इस चीज को अप्लाई करें, right, a lot of congressmen in India can be like very religious practicing Hindus, and they can be very secular when it comes to their politics, while you see someone from a BJP can not practice his religion personally in his life, but he would anyway end up using politics for religion for political purposes. So I think that is quite possible. Even
I don't know, but he espouses extremely secular values, but he is a hardcore Hindutva.
Right. So it is possible. It is quite possible actually. So Jinnah जो चीज कर रहा था, I think what Jinnah was able to do some 70 years back, Hindus are still catching up to that. तो अभी तो हम बहुत पीछे हैं on that curve. That is
the second point that I wanted to make about the article that the example that you read from, right? So this exact phrase has been copied actually from Al-Biruni. Al-Biruni actually was first read by another secular Indian who wrote Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara, Allama Iqbal. So Allama Iqbal was again a very secular person initially to be able to write such kind of lyrical poetry. But then he read Al-Biruni and everyone else. So here Al-Biruni का context में समझना पड़ेगा. Al-Biruni उस समय आए थे जब हिंदूज और मुसलमान एक्चुअली में दो डिफरेंट कल्चर्स थे, सिविलाइजेशंस थे, कंट्रीज थी. तो अब अल-बरूनी लिख रहे हैं उस पर्सपेक्टिव से कि भाई हिंदू और मुसलमान जो है दोनों अलग देश है, अलग कंट्री है, अलग विचार हैं, अलग गॉड्स हैं, वो चीजें अब उसको उसी चीज को एग्जैक्टली वर्बैटिम इफ यू यूजिंग इन मॉडर्न कॉन्टेक्स्ट, इट्स वेरी वेरी डिफरेंट.
हाँ मतलब
So that's
जिन्ना,
my point.
अगर
It
जिन्ना
may be right, it may be right or wrong. I'm not debating that fact, right? वो हो सकता है, but I'm saying verbatim that has been picked up in this, it is actually traceable to Al-Biruni. And Al-Biruni is perspective लिखा था. I think for the current context, we might need a better and a different articulation.
Right. I think matlab this entire idea, matlab, I think this is a separate debate altogether, you know, whether or not religion is the determinant of, you know, national identity, or there can be some other elements inside that, or, you know, can nation have two religions? So this is a like completely different debate altogether. But abhi hum jaise baat kar rahe the, right, ki Gandhi and Jinnah. So another thing that I just remember, and since we are, you know, at the end of our discussion, so Gandhi and Jinnah also couldn't see the countries that they ended up creating, right? Jinnah also died, you know, 1 or 2 years after the creation of Pakistan, and the same thing happened with Gandhi. So I think in a way, you know, whatever their visions may have been for the country, these visions never matured. So we are never sure that, you know, that this was something that the way Pakistan is right now was something that
really
envisioned it to be, because, you know, after his death, a lot of things happened in Pakistan. So yeah, that was my point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very, very good point that you made. And if you see what happened, you know, particularly with the Muslims of UP and North India who went to wanted a different Pakistan, most of them actually stayed back in India, right? And those who went to Pakistan were labeled as muhajirs, or if like Pervez Musharraf, or if they were extremely bad fated like Liaquat Ali Khan, they were murdered.
Right.
Because the people there in Punjab said that who are these people coming from different places in you know the north,
interior,
and taking power, usurping power here, right? They must be killed, and any power battle would happen that way, right? But the fact is that these people from Punjab were extremely secular and led by a unionist party, never really wanted a different Pakistan or different country based on religion itself, right? And the recent, you know, survey of Pakistan that has been released in 2017 shows that there are only 7% Urdu-speaking population in Pakistan right now. 7%. Right. And the entire country is based on Islam and Urduization phenomena, right? And even Jinnah could not speak Urdu. And it is famously, I think Jinnah said that, you know, just with the help of my typewriter, I was able to bargain for a different country, you know, alone. So it speaks volume about the man and what he could achieve.
Right. And I think if we just talk, you know, about the kind of duplicity or the kind of double life that he led, you know, that continued throughout his death also. So I think because he was, so Jinnah was a Shia, and Pakistan still is a like Sunni majority country, and the powers that be at the time of Jinnah's death, you know, they didn't want the ceremonial functions to be done in a Shia fashion. So his original funeral rites were done in a Shia fashion in a personal place. But after that, when he was, you know, when it was done in the more public forum, it was done in a very Sunni kind of format, and, you know, all the memory, you know, there is still this confusion among a lot of Muslims in Pakistan that Jinnah was probably a Sunni. So, you know, he never, you know, kind of got into those debates, which you know, he was more into, you know, creating that united Muslim identity. So never got into that debate. But people who he left behind, they never completely followed the kind of vision that he set for the country, and I think that was his biggest failure also. Unlike Gandhi, who was, you know, successful in leaving behind his followers and successors in a position where they could, you know, guide the country for next 70 years. And that is what makes India and Pakistan very different countries at the end of the day. So on that note, I think we should end this discussion. I think this was a fabulous discussion, and I think we covered a lot of aspects of the life of these two great personalities that have shaped the history of entire subcontinent for last 70 years. Thank you for being with us.